Saving drowning sailors from a whirlpool shipwreck was the best encounter I've run in, well, maybe ever. I'll go over the specific whirlpool mechanics for this fun, non-combat encounter, as well as a persuasion minigame for persuading groups, a mechanic to make breath weapons more interesting, as well as 2 encounters you can use to give information to your players in more creative ways. I'm also going to go over how you can get the encounter mechanics for free, including the maps, on Legend Keeper, the sponsor of today's video. Thank you so much. Welcome to the table. I'm Kelly, and we're going to have some close encounters of the creative kind. I do my best to have a balance of combat and non-combat encounters in my sessions. Now, social encounters are an obvious non-combat encounter to run, and that is the majority of them. But I also like to run encounters where my players can use their class features and skills in initiative order in different ways. I find that it forces them to get creative with their spells and abilities. We're currently playing a fantasy pirate-themed campaign, so I ran this whirlpool encounter while they were sailing from one island to another. But you could also run this on land with some sort of magic black hole or portal or something. The setup goes like this. As you're sailing, you see another ship. As you get closer, you notice that it starts suddenly moving sideways. As you scan the ocean, you see a large whirlpool is formed close to the ship and is drawing it in. You can see the ship fully hoist the sails to get as much power out of them as possible, but it's no use. They're too close. You see some people abandon ship as it nears the whirlpool. What do you do? If your players choose to ignore it and keep sailing, you can describe the shouts and screams of people as they get swallowed by the whirlpool, and then you can take your encounter mechanics, crumple them up, and throw them in the garbage. But if they do go to the rescue, here's how the encounter works. Actually, it'll be easier if I show you. I recently learned this new animation technique. Let's see if it'll work here. I just need a little bit of my own blood, and then I just need to speak these words. Pro dis splendor imolo! Okay, great. I think that worked. For this encounter, I made a map with the player's ship, different tidal zones, and then survivors and wreckage strewn about. Some survivors are conscious and may be able to hang onto a rope or something, while others are unconscious and will need to be carried back. For the debris and survivors, I used the Ocean Surface Assets pack from 2 Minute Tabletop, which is pay what you want, and I've linked it down in the description. On Initiative 0, the tide moves everything 10 feet or 2 squares closer to the whirlpool. As things get closer to the whirlpool, they move faster because the current gets stronger. If anything enters the whirlpool's center, it gets sucked down 60 feet per round. At the bottom, there's a portal to another plane that's opened up. If anything gets sucked all the way down, you can assume it's dead. Unless it's one of your player characters, then maybe they're trapped on another plane, but you can decide. As your players arrive, I describe the other ship getting sucked down into the whirlpool and getting torn apart as it does, to fully illustrate how dangerous this thing is. To make it easier mechanically, I drew tidal zones on my map. The tidal zones act like tidal multipliers. There's a 1-time zone, a 2-time zone, and a 4-time zone. So if a survivor is floating here, on Initiative 0, the tide moves them 10 feet. They move 5 feet, and then they enter into the 2-time zone. They have 5 feet of movement left in the 2-time zone, so they move 10 feet. I know that kind of sounds confusing, but it's worded similar to difficult terrain so you can handle transitions between zones. There's no movement penalty within any of the zones, but everyone who's in the water or floating on the water gets moved on Initiative 0. My players used a combination of one of their lifeboats and some fly spells, and they managed to save about half of the survivors. Now for the treasure for this encounter. That's an important part of any encounter, and it doesn't always have to be something with a gold piece value. The treasure could be new crew members for your player's ship. Some of the survivors could have new skills that strengthen and add to the crew, unlocking a new ability for their ship. I'm sure the survivors would be eager to join a crew led by people who just saved their lives in an impressive fashion. It could also be information, which is my favorite type of treasure to dole out. One of the survivors might know a key piece of information that helps your players achieve their next goal. Or maybe the survivor has a connection that can make it easier for your players to get something they need. And then, obviously, the survivors could have magic items or gold on them that they give to the characters as a thank you. A PDF of the mechanics for this, including how many survivors I created and the ratio of conscious to unconscious survivors, as well as the map I made, are available on my Patreon, which is linked down below. But they're also available as a Legend Keeper file linked down in the description, which you can use with the free trial. Thank you so much to Legend Keeper for sponsoring this video. Before I walk through the Persuasion minigame that I've been using when my players need to persuade large groups, like when they had to persuade the Pirate Council not to play into the hands of the Empire by turning on each other, It was a whole thing. Anyways, before I show you that, I want to share some features inside Legend Keeper that can make managing a campaign really easy. I think the best feature of Legend Keeper is the auto-linking, and I'll talk about that in a second. But first, I want to show you all the collaboration tools. Only one person in your group needs a subscription, and everyone else can collaborate on the project. This means that you can share the task of world building and note-taking with your players, and you can also make information available to them if you want. You can set the permissions for each document so you can choose which information gets shared with your players. And even within shared documents, you can still add secret blocks that only you can see. So even if you share a lore document with your players about a certain noble, you can hide away the juiciest details until they discover them in the game. Automatic linking is my favorite feature in Legend Keeper. Linking articles together in other programs isn't difficult, but having it done automatically and in the background is just so much better. Once something is linked, if you mouse over it, it'll show a preview of that document so you could quickly grab some details like an NPC description or voice without having to leave the page you're on. The offline mode on Legend Keeper feels like magic. You can load Legend Keeper while you're offline and make changes to your world. Once you come back online, it'll sync with the server and merge your changes with any collaborator changes. One caveat, you do have to navigate directly to app.legendkeeper.com for this to work. Legend Keeper also helps you create faster with article templates. These templates are a skeleton of formatting that you can quickly fill in. It really helps to have all your NPCs, for example, formatted with the same layout so you know exactly where to look on the page for certain pieces of information. It comes with some default templates which you can edit, or you can create your own from scratch. If any of these features sound good to you, then you should try it out for yourself. Legend Keeper has a 2-week free trial, and you can use the code PowerWordSpill to get 1 month for free. Check it out at the link in the description. Making persuasion checks feel more significant is something I've struggled with for a while. If the characters are asking someone important to do something big, like asking a queen to send forces to a besieged town, or convincing a wizard school to give them an item that'll allow them to fight a great evil, then making one persuasion roll just felt underwhelming. The other option is to send them on a quest to do something for the important people so that they grant your players whatever they're asking for, but sometimes I don't want to turn it into a whole multi-session thing. I used to require them to make multiple checks in a row and they would need a certain number of successes, but that wasn't really satisfying either. So in the end, I decided to make a minigame. Some mechanics that would allow me to run it as a little encounter so it would feel more significant than a single roll, but not take up the time of a whole quest. I'd also love to show this one to you with some fancy animations, but feeling a little low on blood. Although, apparently I can sacrifice something I love dearly to make the animations. Yeah, I'll just stick to 2D graphics for this one. The minigame has the players moving around and speaking with influential people and trying to win them over to their cause. If they get enough influential people on their side, the group as a whole will side with them or be able to influence the leader enough to grant them what they want. In its current form, the minigame works like this. There are some face-down tokens on a board. These tokens have a value of 1, 2, or 3. Each player can use their turn to either flip over a token to discover how important this person is, or make a persuasion check to win this person over to their side. Flipping a token over represents taking some time to talk to them and figure out exactly how important and influential they are. A player can gamble and choose to make a persuasion check on a face-down token if they want. The DCs to persuade the tokens are 10 for a token with a value of 1, 15 for a value with a token of 2, and 20 for a value with a token of 3. If you have 4 players, there should be 8 tokens, 2 3s, 2 2s, and 4 1s. I have a table to adjust the encounter for different numbers of players in the Legend Keeper file and in the PDF on the Patreon, as well as a map and some tokens that you can use. Thank you so much to my patrons, I really appreciate you. To set a DC for this check, just set a DC like you normally would, somewhere between 10 and 20. The maximum possible score for the game is 21. Once you have your token set up, your players each take a turn. They can go in any order, which can add to the strategy. The minigame consists of 3 rounds. At the end of the 3rd round, tally up the value of all the tokens that they persuaded, and for a 4-player variant, add 7. I would err on the side of lower DCs unless your players are asking for something really big. This is already quite an investment of actual game time, so they should be able to succeed most of the time. If your players fail, they could attempt it again the next day. I'd lower the DC of each token by 2 for every attempt on a subsequent day. I think this would represent wearing these people down. Or alternatively, they might get annoyed depending on what kind of NPCs they are, so the DCs might go up. Before I go over a way that you can give your players information about the BBEG without actually encountering them, I want to go over something I did with breath weapons to make them a bit more interactive, which also gave my players a secondary objective for that combat. Instead of having the breath weapon reach recharge on a dice roll, you can have it be connected to something in the world that gets consumed when the breath weapon is used, or that could be destroyed by your players to prevent the breath weapon from being used. This could be crystals or runes, or if you want to go dark with it like I did, you can have your BBEG use the life energy of their prisoners with special necrotic artificer cells, like necrotic batteries basically. Whatever you choose, just give it some simple object stats. I gave the prisoner cells an AC of 19, 10 HP, and a damage threshold of 10. That way I didn't have to track HP for each object, they had to be destroyed in one attack. The monster I used was a young topaz dragon from Fizzbands, but I just reskinned it as a really tough and strong necromantic spellcaster. Breath weapons are very powerful because they're meant to only be used once or twice in an encounter, so be careful about putting too many of the breath weapon items in your encounter in case your players don't destroy them. Putting in 3 or 4 worked well for me. Whatever consumable item you choose, it should be spread out around the map, either built into the layer, or your BBEG can throw them out or summon them on their first turn as part of the action of using the first breath weapon. How you describe these becomes very important in making this feel fair for your players. I played it a little too close to the chest, which meant the BBEG got more breath weapons than I would have liked. I didn't TPK my party, but it was closer than I would have liked. If the consumable item is built into the layer, you can ask your players for a perception check when they enter the room and describe the items on a successful check. Otherwise, when the BBEG uses the breath weapon for the first time, you can describe the crystals or whatever you chose as lighting up and then turning to dust or something. And then after the description, you can just fully tell your players that these things give the BBEG their breath weapon, so destroying them will prevent the BBEG from being able to use their breath weapon. Next time I run this, I won't have any hesitation just straight up telling my players above game what they need to do. The last 2 encounters don't involve any special mechanics, but they are pretty versatile, so you can use them in almost any campaign. The first is to have your characters encounter the aftermath of your BBEG. I haven't used this in my own campaign, but in a campaign I played in, the DM used it really effectively. We came across the aftermath of a slaughter in the forest, and after looking around and doing some investigating, we got some information about the unusual type of magic that was being used and the strength of the BBEG. Not only did we gain some beneficial information, but it also strengthened our resolve to go after this enemy because we witnessed the chaos and destruction they were causing. I'm a big fan of having your characters encounter the BBEG early in the campaign and having them be part of the story throughout, but it can be dicey to have your characters come face to face with a super powerful, super evil monster at a really low level. This is an encounter that still gives you the benefits of coming face to face with them without risking your players getting killed or having to think of a story reason why this super evil, super powerful being didn't wipe your characters off the map with a flick of their wrist. In my most recent session, I had my players come across 2 enemy ships from the same faction that were fighting each other. It turned into a really fun encounter that ended up being half combat and half social. In my current campaign, there's an Empire faction, and they have a very strong navy. The characters encountered 2 Empire navy ships fighting each other, which is extremely unusual. They decided to sit and wait to see what happened, so I had them roll attacks and damages for the 2 ships until one surrendered. Then the characters swooped in to attack the other weakened ship. The scenario was that the crew on one of the Empire ships had mutinied and attacked the other Empire ship. The mutiny crew had some valuable information that my players didn't know they needed. After my players disabled the other ship, they boarded each ship and had to speak to the crews to piece things together and then decide what to do with everyone. It felt like an easy way to turn what could have been just another random encounter into something a bit more interesting that involved a combat aspect and a social aspect. This is a pretty flexible one. You could run it with 2 groups of bandits, a small skirmish of soldiers, or a bunch of town guards. Having them both be from the same faction makes it a little bit more intriguing as a hook. Are you gonna try any of these? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed them, consider subscribing. And if you're looking for more ideas about encounters, you can check out this video here for some tips on improving random encounters and making them more significant. I appreciate you.